Picture this, a towering figure with the sleek head of a jackal and the muscular body of a man, standing guard over the realm of the dead. This is Anubis, ancient Egypt's original Grim Reaper, but way cooler and definitely better dressed. While most people today recognize him from movies and museum displays, few know the wild family drama and power struggles that made him one of Egypt's most enduring deities. But here's the thing that'll blow your mind. Anubis wasn't just some scary death god lurking in tombs. He was actually the ultimate protector, the divine mortician who literally invented the art of preserving the dead, and the most fair judge you could ever hope for in the afterlife. Ready to discover how a god born from deception became the most trusted guardian of souls? Trust me, this story has more twists than a mummy's bandages. The birth of Anubis reads like the world's first soap opera, complete with mistaken identities and family secrets. According to the most popular myth, his mother was Nephthys, the goddess of morning and night. His father? Well, that's where things get spicy. Most stories point to Osiris, the god of the underworld. But here's the kicker. Osiris wasn't supposed to be the father at all. You see, Nephthys was married to Set, Osiris's brother, and basically the ancient Egyptian equivalent of that relative nobody wants at family dinner. But Nephthys had her eyes on the much more charming Osiris, who was happily married to her sister Isis. Talk about keeping it in the family, literally. The whole situation was messier than a tomb robber's inventory. Now, why did the ancient Egyptians choose a jackal to represent this powerful god? It wasn't random. These clever people noticed that jackals hung around cemeteries and burial grounds in the desert. Instead of seeing this as creepy, they thought, hey, these animals are already guarding our dead. So they figured a jackal-headed god would be the perfect supernatural security system for the afterlife. The symbolism runs even deeper than that. Jackals are naturally associated with the liminal spaces, those in-between areas where the desert meets civilization, where life meets death. Anubis became the ultimate boundary guardian, standing at the crossroads between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Pretty smart thinking for people who didn't have Netflix to inspire their storytelling. Here's where the story gets really juicy. And I mean ancient Egyptian telenovela levels of drama. Nephthys was desperately in love with her brother-in-law Osiris, but he was completely devoted to Isis. So what did she do? She pulled off the ultimate catfish scheme, thousands of years before the internet was even a dream. One night, Nephthys disguised herself as Isis and seduced Osiris in the darkness. The deception worked perfectly. Too perfectly, actually. Osiris never suspected he wasn't with his beloved wife, and by morning, Nephthys had accomplished her mission. But as with all great deceptions, this one came with consequences that would shake the entire pantheon of Egyptian gods. When Nephthys discovered she was pregnant, panic set in faster than you can say, divine paternity test. She knew Set would go absolutely ballistic if he found out the truth. So she did what any reasonable goddess would do. She abandoned baby Anubis in the marshes of the Nile Delta. Harsh? Maybe. But remember, these were gods dealing with cosmic-level family dysfunction. Fortunately for little Anubis, Isis wasn't the type to hold grudges against innocent babies, even if they were the result of her husband's unwitting affair. She found the abandoned infant and decided to raise him as her own. Talk about taking the high road. Isis became the mother Anubis needed, and honestly, she was probably better at it than his birth mother anyway. This family drama set the stage for everything that would follow in Egyptian mythology. Anubis grew up knowing the truth about his parentage, which made his relationship with his uncle Set particularly complicated. Set already had anger issues, but knowing that his wife had cheated with his brother and that the proof was walking around with a jackal head, that added a whole new level to their family dysfunction that would explode later in spectacular fashion. Before Osiris became the big boss of the underworld, guess who was running the show? That's right, our jackal-headed friend Anubis was the original Lord of the Dead. This wasn't some junior position either. He was the guy when it came to everything death-related in ancient Egypt. Think of him as the CEO of the Afterlife Corporation, and business was booming. Anubis didn't just sit on a throne looking intimidating, though he definitely did that too. He was hands-on with his work, literally inventing the process of mummification. The guy was basically the world's first mortician, embalmer, and funeral director all rolled into one divine package. When someone died, Anubis was there to make sure their body was preserved perfectly for the journey ahead. His rise to power wasn't just about being in the right place at the right time. Anubis proved himself incredibly reliable and, more importantly, completely incorruptible. While other gods might play favorites or get distracted by their own dramas, Anubis remained focused on his sacred duties. Death doesn't take vacation days, and neither did he. The early Egyptians were so impressed with Anubis that they built an entire cult around him. His worship spread throughout Egypt faster than gossip in a small town. People trusted him with their most precious possession, their eternal souls. That's not the kind of responsibility you hand over to just anyone, even if they are a god. But here's what made Anubis truly special. He understood that death wasn't the end, just a transformation. While everyone else was terrified of dying, Anubis made it clear that with proper preparation and his guidance, death could be the beginning of something even better. He was like the ultimate life coach, except his specialty was helping people navigate the afterlife. Talk about a niche market. Now we get to the part of the story that would make Shakespeare weep, the downfall of Osiris, orchestrated by none other than his jealous brother Set. Remember how I mentioned Set had anger issues? Well, those issues were about to explode in the most dramatic way possible, and poor Anubis was about to get a front row seat to the ultimate family tragedy. Set had been stewing in jealousy for years. Osiris was beloved by everyone, married to the gorgeous Isis, and basically living his best god life. Set? Not so much. So he devised a plan that was equal parts clever and absolutely diabolical. He threw a massive party because nothing says murder plot like good hospitality, and brought along a beautiful, ornate chest as a gift. The chest was gorgeous, crafted from the finest materials and decorated with intricate designs. Set announced that whoever fit perfectly inside could keep it. Of course, the sneaky brother had measured it specifically for Osiris. When Osiris climbed in to try it out, Set's accomplices slammed the lid shut and sealed it tight. Then they threw the whole thing into the Nile River. Definitely not the party favor Osiris was expecting. Isis was absolutely devastated when she discovered what had happened. She immediately began searching for her husband's body, traveling throughout Egypt and beyond. Her grief was so profound that it moved both gods and mortals to help in her quest. Meanwhile, Anubis watched this family destruction unfold, knowing that his own complicated parentage was part of what had driven Set to this desperate act. The cosmic balance was shattered, and someone was going to have to step up to fix it. And that someone was about to be Anubis himself. When Isis finally found Osiris's body, it was in pretty rough shape. Let's just say the Nile hadn't been kind to it. This is where Anubis stepped up to become the ultimate problem solver. He looked at this seemingly impossible situation and basically said, "Hold my beer," except, ancient Egyptian gods probably didn't drink beer. Or maybe they did. Different times. Anubis invented the entire mummification process from scratch, working with Osiris's damaged body as his first official client. Talk about pressure. He carefully cleaned and prepared the body, removing organs and preserving them in special jars. Each step was performed with religious precision and sacred rituals that would become the gold standard for Egyptian burial practices. The process wasn't just about physical preservation. Anubis understood that the spiritual aspects were equally important. He developed specific prayers, incantations, and ceremonies that had to accompany each step of mummification. Every bandage wrap had meaning. Every herb and resin served both practical and mystical purposes. This wasn't just mortuary science, it was divine art. But here's the really cool part. Anubis didn't keep this knowledge to himself like some kind of trade secret. He taught the process to human priests and embalmers, essentially creating the world's first mortuary school. These skilled practitioners became known as the servants of Anubis, and they took their training seriously. After all, you don't want to mess up when you're preparing someone for eternity. The techniques Anubis developed were so effective that we can still see perfectly preserved mummies thousands of years later. Ancient Egyptian embalmers became so skilled that they could preserve bodies better than many modern methods. The god who started as an abandoned baby in the marshes had literally conquered death itself through the power of preservation. Anubis also established the sacred timing and rituals around mummification. The process took exactly 70 days, a number that held deep spiritual significance. During this time, the deceased family would mourn and prepare for the burial ceremonies, while Anubis and his priests worked their preservation magic. It was like the world's most elaborate and meaningful funeral service, designed to ensure safe passage to the afterlife. Now we come to Anubis's most famous role, and honestly, it's the job that made him legendary throughout the ancient world. Forget about being a preservation expert. This was where Anubis truly earned his reputation as the most important god you'd ever want on your side. He became the ultimate judge in the afterlife, but not in the way you might expect. The ancient Egyptians believed that when you died, your heart contained the record of everything you'd ever done. Every good deed, every lie, every moment of kindness or cruelty. It was like having a moral credit score permanently tattooed on your soul. And guess who got to check that score? Yep, our jackal-headed friend Anubis, armed with the most important scale in the universe. The ceremony took place in the Hall of Two Truths, and it was more dramatic than any courtroom scene you've ever watched. The deceased person's heart was placed on one side of Anubis's sacred scales. On the other side sat the feather of Maat, representing truth, justice, and cosmic balance. If your heart was lighter than the feather, meaning you'd lived a good, honest life, you got the ultimate prize, eternal paradise in the afterlife. But if your heart was heavier than the feather, well, that's where things got really intense. A terrifying creature called Ammit, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, was waiting nearby. This devourer of hearts would literally consume your soul, meaning you'd be erased from existence forever. No second chances, no appeals process, just cosmic game over. Talk about high stakes. What made Anubis so respected in this role was his complete impartiality. He didn't care if you were a pharaoh or a farmer, rich or poor, famous or forgotten. The scales didn't lie, and neither did he. This divine judge couldn't be bribed, intimidated, or fooled. He was the ultimate example of blind justice. Thousands of years before, that became a legal concept. The weighing of the heart ceremony became so central to Egyptian beliefs about death that virtually every tomb painting, papyrus scroll, and religious text featured Anubis performing this crucial duty. People spent their entire lives trying to keep their hearts light, knowing that one day they'd face this ultimate test. And amazingly, they trusted Anubis completely to judge them fairly, which says everything you need to know about his reputation for integrity and wisdom. Let's talk about Anubis's divine accessories, because even ancient gods knew the importance of good branding. The jackal wasn't just a random choice for his appearance. It was a stroke of pure genius. Real jackals were already hanging around Egyptian cemeteries, so the ancients figured they must be natural guardians of the dead. It was like getting a supernatural security system that came with its own mascot. But Anubis had more symbols than a modern corporate logo. His sacred scales weren't just any ordinary weighing device. They represented the ultimate balance between justice and mercy. These weren't the kind of scales you'd find at your local market. They were cosmic instruments that could measure the weight of a soul. Pretty impressive for ancient technology, right? The ankh was another key symbol associated with Anubis, representing eternal life and divine protection. When depicted in his hands, it showed his power to grant continued existence in the afterlife. He also carried a ceremonial staff called the Waz scepter, which looked like a long rod with a stylized animal head on top. This wasn't just for show. It symbolized his authority over life, death, and everything in between. Anubis's sacred animals extended beyond just jackals. Black dogs were also considered holy to him, which makes sense since they shared similar protective instincts. Ancient Egyptians would often mummify these sacred animals and bury them in special cemeteries near Anubis temples. Talk about taking pet love to the next level. These dogs got the full royal burial treatment. The color black was deeply significant to Anubis worship. While many cultures associate black with evil or danger, Egyptians saw it as the color of fertile soil and regeneration. Anubis's black skin represented the promise of rebirth and new life after death. It was like wearing the ultimate symbol of hope on your divine body. Even his posture had meaning. Anubis was often depicted lying down like a sphinx, with his head raised and alert. This watchful guardian position showed that he was always vigilant, always ready to protect the dead from any threats. Whether carved in stone or painted on tomb walls, every detail of Anubis's appearance told a story about his sacred duties and divine powers. The most important temple dedicated to Anubis was located in Sinopolis, which literally means city of dogs. And yes, they named an entire city after his sacred animals. This wasn't just any ordinary temple. It was the headquarters of Anubis worship, complete with living sacred jackals and dogs that were treated like divine celebrities. Imagine a whole city where every dog was considered holy. It must have been paradise for animal lovers. The priests of Anubis were some of the most respected religious figures in ancient Egypt. They wore special jackal masks during ceremonies, essentially cosplaying as their god thousands of years before Comic-Con was even a dream. These weren't just costume parties, though. The rituals were deeply sacred and required years of training to perform correctly. The worship practices at Anubis temples were fascinating and complex. Devotees would bring offerings of meat, bread, and beer to honor the god. But the really special offerings were mummified animals, particularly dogs and jackals, which were considered the ultimate tribute. The temples became like ancient Egyptian pet cemeteries, except way more elaborate and spiritually significant. During major festivals, the entire community would participate in processions honoring Anubis. The priests would carry sacred statues of the god through the streets, while people chanted prayers and made offerings. These weren't quiet, solemn affairs. They were full-blown celebrations with music, dancing, and feasting. Ancient Egyptians knew how to throw a proper religious party. The daily rituals at Anubis temples followed strict schedules that would make modern gym enthusiasts jealous. Morning prayers, midday offerings, evening ceremonies. The priests kept busy from dawn to dusk. They believed that maintaining these constant rituals kept Anubis happy and ensured his continued protection over both the living and the dead. No pressure there, right? As Egypt evolved through different dynasties, so did Anubis's role in the pantheon, like a divine career change that lasted thousands of years. During the Old Kingdom, he was the undisputed king of the dead, the top dog in the afterlife hierarchy. But as political power shifted and new religious ideas emerged, Anubis had to adapt or risk becoming yesterday's god. The big change came when Osiris's cult started gaining serious momentum. Suddenly, there was a new player in the death game, and Osiris had some major advantages. He was a former pharaoh who had experienced death and resurrection firsthand. This created an interesting situation where Anubis had to transition from being the boss to being the incredibly important right-hand man. Not everyone handles career changes that gracefully. By the Middle Kingdom, a clever compromise had emerged. Osiris became the supreme ruler of the underworld, while Anubis retained his crucial role as the guide and judge of souls. It was like a divine merger where both gods kept their most important functions. Anubis's expertise in mummification and soul judging was too valuable to replace, so smart Egyptian theologians found a way to make it work for everyone. The new kingdom brought even more changes as Egypt became a major international power. Foreign influences crept into Egyptian religion, but Anubis proved remarkably adaptable. He absorbed characteristics from other death gods and maintained his relevance by becoming even more specialized in his core functions. Sometimes the best way to survive change is to become really good at what you do best. Walk into any major museum with an Egyptian collection, and you'll spot Anubis immediately. He's basically the most photogenic god in the entire pantheon. Artists loved depicting him because his jackal head was so distinctive and dramatic. Whether painted on papyrus, carved in stone, or crafted in gold, Anubis always commanded attention. He was like the ancient world's most recognizable celebrity, appearing on everything from royal sarcophagi to common burial amulets. The Book of the Dead was practically Anubis's starring vehicle. Imagine it as his blockbuster movie series that ran for thousands of years. Every copy featured detailed illustrations of him performing the weighing of heart ceremony, guiding souls through the afterlife, and protecting the deceased from various dangers. These weren't just religious texts. They were elaborate guidebooks with Anubis as the ultimate tour guide for the afterlife. And just like modern movie franchises, every version had slightly different details but kept the core story that made him so compelling to ancient audiences. As Egypt entered the Greco-Roman period, Anubis faced his biggest challenge yet: cultural fusion that would make even the most adaptable god dizzy. The Greeks, who had their own ideas about death and the afterlife, encountered Anubis and basically said, "Cool dog-headed god, but can we make him more Greek?" This led to some interesting hybrid worship practices that would have confused the original Egyptian priests. The Romans continued this trend of cultural mixing, but they actually helped preserve Anubis worship by spreading it throughout their empire. Suddenly, temples to Anubis were popping up in places like Rome, Greece, and even Britain. It was like the ancient world's first international franchise, complete with local variations and adaptations. Not bad for a god who started out in the Egyptian desert. However, the rise of Christianity eventually led to the decline of Anubis worship, along with most other pagan deities. But here's the thing about Anubis. He was too iconic to completely disappear. His image and concepts influenced early Christian art and ideas about judgment in the afterlife. You can see echoes of the weighing of heart ceremony in later Christian depictions of divine judgment. Some ideas are just too powerful to die, even when the religions that created them fade away. Fast forward to today, and Anubis is having quite the renaissance. He's become a pop culture icon, appearing in everything from blockbuster movies like the Mummy series to video games, comic books, and fantasy novels. Modern creators love him because he represents that perfect combination of mysterious, powerful, and visually striking that audiences can't resist. Plus, let's be honest, a jackal-headed god just looks incredibly cool on a movie poster. But Anubis's influence goes deeper than just entertainment. His concept of impartial judgment has influenced legal systems and ethical thinking throughout history. The idea of weighing someone's deeds to determine their fate resonates across cultures and time periods. Modern courtrooms may not have actual scales for weighing hearts, but the symbolism of balanced justice traces back to concepts that Anubis embodied thousands of years ago. Perhaps most importantly, Anubis represents humanity's eternal struggle with mortality and the hope for something beyond death. In our modern world, where we're still grappling with questions about what happens after we die, Anubis remains relevant as a symbol of guidance, protection, and fair judgment. Whether you believe in ancient Egyptian afterlife concepts or not, there's something comforting about the idea of a wise, incorruptible guide waiting to help us navigate whatever comes next. So there you have it, the incredible journey of Anubis, from abandoned baby to cosmic judge, from family drama survivor to eternal guardian of souls. His story touches on everything that makes us human: family conflicts, moral choices, the fear of death, and the hope for justice. No wonder he's remained one of the most recognizable and beloved figures from ancient Egypt for thousands of years. But here's the thing. Anubis's story is just one thread in the incredibly rich tapestry of Egyptian mythology. If you found his tale fascinating, imagine what other amazing stories are waiting to be discovered in the pantheon of Egyptian gods and goddesses. From the sun god Ra's daily journey across the sky to the magic of Isis, from the wisdom of Thoth to the power of Sobek the crocodile god. There's a whole universe of incredible myths, symbols, and ancient wisdom just waiting for you to explore. So keep digging, keep learning, and who knows? You might just find your next favorite ancient deity waiting in the shadows of history.